see, when I started teaching in France, that would have been in 1986, I consider that this is when I started to teach the violin and not coaching violinists or string ensembles. To help me get pointed in a good direction, I decided to ask a few of my colleagues if they could name one thing that they felt was responsible for their students' success, for their success as teachers. And to my utter surprise, they all said the same thing: scales. Because of this, I set out to understand why. Personally, though, when I was young, I detested scales. Now, I remember one of my first lessons with Miss DeLay at the Aspen Music Festival when she looked at me smiling and said, "Billy, why don't I show you how we do scales?" I was totally turned off by the phrase, "how we do scales," and it sounded much too elitist to me at the time. But I did as she showed me anyhow and hid my chagrin. But before I show you what she showed me, why don't I first explain a bit of basic information that I think is important to understand about scales. Oh yes, scales do include chromatics, broken thirds, and double stops, but I will speak about those in other videos. You see, what I came to understand when I searched a bit deeper, understand about scales, was that the left-hand patterns found in scales were symmetrical. That this symmetry mirrored the Tetra chords that we use, that we define scales with. Okay, shall I bore you for a moment? Yeah, I will. So, to see this, let's divide the 8 degrees of the scale up into 2 parts, and let's call them Tetra chords. I will mirror this in my fingering board, which should help you to see the finger patterns even better. Now, between each degree, there will be a half step or a whole step. For example, in a major scale, the lower Tetra chords will look like this. The lower Tetra chord. And the upper Tetra chord will look like this. The upper Tetra chord. Now, here is what it looks like in a minor scale, for which there are 3 flavors, I like to call them. There's natural minor, harmonic minor, and melodic minor. So let's look at the natural minor Tetra chords. First, lower Tetra chord. Upper Tetra chord. So do you see how those patterns line up? What about harmonic minor? Do you see the patterns? Do you see how that relates to what we're doing here? And lastly, melodic minor. It's the only minor scale in which the descending pattern changes. All of this leads us to an understanding of the symmetry involved in a 1-octave scale. With 2-octave scales, the lower 2 strings have this symmetry, and the upper strings have another. Here, the lower strings, the upper strings. Why don't we look at Kaiser's Etude number 5? You can see the pattern changes very easily in this etude. First pattern, second, first, first, second, first. And so we arrive at 3-octave scales. Let's explore the fingerings for these 3-octave scales. For me, the most commonly used fingering is the one for B flat major. It goes for all of the scales above B flat, assuming you start on the G string. As well, it's the fingering most often used in the pieces that we play, that we perform. Here, have a look at my fingering chart. Obviously, learning how to practice scales is important, as what we will have learned in trying to improve them is exactly what we will do later in working on our scale-like passages in our pieces. So, first of all, I've set my scale up to be done 1 note to a bow, then slurred by 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24 for even more symmetry. Here, let me show you. 1 note to a bow. Two notes to a bow. Three notes to a bow. Four. Six. Eight. 12. 24. So to make it symmetrical in 24 notes to a bow, I add a note at the bottom, and I call this pattern 2-1-2. At the top, I double the note, and when I get back to the bottom, all of this gives me a 24-note scale ascending and a 24-note scale descending. Now we need to understand that the goal, one of the goals, is to make the best sound that we can from the frog to the tip. Now, using the same bow speed, we continue to try and make the best sound possible, that same sound. Doing this using a metronome is probably the best solution, as through time we can determine our speed, pressure, etc. We continue to do this through 24 notes to a bow, going up and going down. And of course, we must discuss arpeggios. Arpeggios are scales that skip notes. For us, we use 3-octave arpeggios, but do remember that they are based on triads and chords. Sometimes, to get this point across, I will ask the student to name the first 3 notes of the arpeggio. B flat, D flat, F. And then I will ask them to name the next three notes. B flat, D flat, F. By this time, they sort of picked it up. Because the arpeggio is a triad. Those three notes played three times ascending and descending three times as well. So with this in mind, why don't we look at the triads and chords for flesh arpeggios? So we start these triads with B flat minor, B flat major, G minor first inversion, E flat major second inversion, E flat minor second inversion, B flat diminished seventh, B flat dominant seventh, and if we turn these into 3-octave arpeggios, it gives us B flat minor, B flat major, G minor first inversion, E flat major second inversion, E flat minor second inversion, B flat diminished seventh, B flat dominant seventh. Now that we have all of this in place, let's set up the how we need to practice these scales. Let's identify some of the issues that we are trying to set parameters for in this B flat major scale, so that we can understand how to get the scale to improve and how we can use that improvement, that process in the pieces that we perform. Let's consider touch. When I think about touch, I work towards getting ping on the way up. What is ping? Well, ping is throwing your finger to the string to get this sound. Do you hear that pop? You see, your finger goes down to the string much like a ping pong ball bounces on a table. When I was young, Stephen Clapp, formerly dean of the Juilliard School, until he passed away a few years ago, had me play scales this way, barely touching the string to encourage my touch, the development of my touch. Now that I've explored the lightness and I've got my ping, I need to bring my finger from the string. And for this, I use left hand Pizz. Miss DeLay explained it to me this way. Imagine that your second finger is on the string, and from there back, it's cool or normal temperature. But from there higher, it's very hot wire. Try to get your third finger to and from the string without getting burned. like this. Ooh, I got burned. And so, ping, as she called it, was born. Try doing it these ways to get ping to the string. 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, four. And for descending left-hand Pizz, not so hard. Let's look at this passage in Zergunerweisen by Sarasate for left-hand Pizz. Let's now look at the scale excerpt from Paganini's Concerto. Going up. Trying to get the ping. And down the Pizz. Giving the following. And what about our finger patterns that we discovered in our scales? In one of my videos for virtualsheetmusic.com, I speak about some patterns that were shown to me by Shlomo Mentz. Connecting these patterns to scales shows us how they leave the abstraction and come into the world of tonality. So why don't we put all this together in a B-flat major ascending scale? This would mean that if I looked at the G string, the pattern is on the D string, the pattern is on the A string, the pattern is and on the E string, the pattern is. We can, of course, do the same thing descending. Having identified these patterns allows me to go deeper into my understanding of how to practice for pitch, how to practice for speed, all of those elements. So to explore those patterns, why don't we look at this Don't Etude, Opus 37, number 1. First pattern. Second pattern. Third pattern. Fourth. And the last. Ah. Why don't we look at an example from Brooks' Scottish Fantasy? First pattern. Whole half with a shift. Very interesting one. Half, whole half. Whole with a shift. Whole half with a shift. Or we could look at this excerpt from Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor. Whole half. Whole half. And back. Same. Shift. Whole. And back. And shift. Ho. And back. How many times have you impatiently rolled your fingers on a table or on your leg or on your arm or your body while you were waiting for something to happen? We can use this idea in learning how to play things fast. Like this, rolling my fingers on my hand. You know. You see, once Miss DeLay said to me in a lesson that she could play faster than anyone. It was a cute story. She looked at me and then she said, you have to say, really? And I did. She goes, yes, I can play faster than anyone. She said, now you have to say, prove it. And of course I said, okay, prove it. And she said, okay. You have to look. You have to be really attentive. Because it's going to be really fast. I need to warm up. She told me, okay. She said, okay, I'm ready. Are you ready? And I said, yes. And she said, did you hear it? She said, oh, okay, I'll slow it down a little bit. So have a look at what I mean through this Kreutzer Etude number 23. So, just like rolling our fingers. Just like rolling our fingers. Rolling. Rolling. Just like rolling our fingers. All right, now let's apply this to Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto, this excerpt. Rolling, rolling. Everything is rolling. Even in Tchaikovsky, it's rolling. Okay, so now, why don't we look at shifts? First off, the mechanics of shifting are much like throwing a ball, like this. Obviously, learning the mechanical form involved in shifting leads us to understanding how to connect distances. This requires an observation that fingers must act as guides to other fingers. In a scale, I would locate all the shifts ascending, for example. B flat major, D to E flat on the A string. I'm going to practice a 3-4 like I just did, and then, now that I've located where my first finger should go, because I did 3-4, I'm going to put my first finger there. Much like Shevchik. Let's try another one on the E string. C to D. Same thing. Third finger, then I put my first finger where my third finger was. Two, three. I'm practicing the shifts in my scale. So now that we've started to understand our mechanics, let's see if it works. Why don't we have a look at shifts in this etude by Furio, number 13. All right? And why don't we look at the shifts from this excerpt of Paganini's concerto? So we have the first shift, which we can practice again. 1-4, 1-1. All of these shifts we can practice either. That was 1-4, 4-1, 1-1, 1-1. Why don't we look at this excerpt from Zergunnerweisen using shifting and patterns to map the location, to map how we get to where we want to be. Let's use this Zergunnerweisen excerpt to show how to get from here to there. We do this through mapping. So I'm going to map. Here we go. From 1 to 3, 1-1. 1 to 3, 1-1. Now, unless I want to use a fourth finger for the F, which I probably don't, as I need to be able to do. So I need to extend to this B flat And that, if I bring my third finger over, that will give me the F. Let's see. So, here we go. D, F, F. And I've mapped my way to the F natural from the chords. Now, we must have a discussion about vibrato, which, vibrato. Okay. You see, once in France, I was teaching a young student who was 8 or 9 years old, and I just could not get her to vibrate. I tried so hard. I did everything that I knew, but after about 9 months, I felt like I was doing more harm than good. So I was about to suggest that she switch teachers. Now, at this point, an older student came to a lesson complaining, bitterly complaining, about her forthcoming jury, saying that there was Bach, and she certainly would not play it as she had played it before in her juries. I asked why. She said, well, the jury members said that they told me my trills sounded like Tweety Bird. Tweety Bird. I laughed and said, okay, well, why don't you just slow it down? Slow the gesture down. She looked at me. She was a bit startled. She did it, and well, all was good. But this made me think about my younger student, and so I had her do trills like this, or 2, 3, for a couple of weeks. I then, when I felt like it was the right time, I said, okay, do the trill again. Now, don't put your third finger down. And she looked, and voila, she had a vibrato. So here's an etude by Kaiser. The etude is number 30 that I use to explore this connection between trills and vibrato. You see, there's the first note, then we've got this, which is going back. Going the other way. So here we go. Good way to start looking at vibrato. Or this Kreutzer etude. It's number 20. You see, we start the next one. I'm getting ready, again, this. This is helping me to understand the gesture. We can even do now in the scale, we can look at going from one note to another, like this. Let's go from 3 to 2. Here, let me get closer. Did you see that? Or the other way. So let's try doing that with a vibrato that continues, as when you go from one finger to another, there should be a flow. In a scale, we could do... So we're keeping the vibrato going from one note to the other. Even going the other way. We can do this in a scale. We can practice this continuous vibrato in a scale. So we have this note going to this. Now the slide. So playing cleanly is all about coordination, about coordinating the movement of the bow in the right hand with the movements of the fingers in the left. One way to think about this timing is to understand that your finger must always be in place before releasing the other. In other words, my second finger is going, but my first finger needs to be there if it's going to be clean. For example, if I were to play 3 then 2, my second finger should already be in place, as then lifting the third finger and the second would already be there, so we would have a clean transfer. An etude that is good for this exploration is Kreutzer number 8. To be clean, finger has to be there before the bow starts. This Kreutzer etude is good because we can, bow is there, and it will not start until the finger is ready. Finger has to be there before the bow. This is a very good etude to practice that with. Kreutzer number 8. Looking at the literature, why don't we look at the third movement of the Wieniawski Concerto in D minor number 2. We have to be really sure finger. We can try different things like slurring it to go quickly, or 4 notes, 2, all kinds of different ways we can try it. Ooh, we could even all kinds of different things with rhythms, with more bows to a note. And finally on my list, of course, we should talk about pitch or intonation. So, just how do we know a note is in tune? Well, basically, I think we know it's in tune by its placement from the note that came before it. So, if that's true, wouldn't it follow that I know that my second finger is in tune because of the placement from my first finger? its distance from my first finger. With that in mind, this study is best accomplished with one note to a bow to start in the scale. Obviously, maintaining the finger placement through the other notes per bow is needed as well, going up and coming down. Now, everything is about the intonation, it's about pitch. But here's a classic etude to work on this. Let's look at Kreutzer number 2. Tonal centers, I went from C major to A minor to F major. So from C, A minor, F major. I struggled so hard with pitch for the first lines of the Sibelius Concerto. Let's look at that. Maybe that could be helpful. Such a hard time I had with this. We just have to break things down. We're now extending back. Second finger has to be down. It is a shift. Another shift. Another. We have to identify each thing, each moment, each activity that we're doing, so that we can figure out how best to practice it, how best to get it in tune. Be creative. Find ways. And so with all of this, we have taken a closer look into scales and arpeggios and gotten a better idea of what can be accomplished by connecting them with our etudes and then our pieces. Now, is this all that we can do? Of course not. Rhythms, for example, are a wonderful way to achieve certain goals. It's just that we need to be careful in finding those things that are helpful towards achieving the goal that we've set out to accomplish. We need to creatively find ways to achieve those goals. Once I made this logo for a book that I wrote called In Search of: A Guide to Violin Excellence. Let's take a closer look at the logo. Do you see the connections?